First of all, big thanks to the Cope team for putting all this together and making this going as smooth as it is. It's really impressive. Today we are going to talk about publication integrity and research integrity beyond publishing a bit. My name is Tim Cassius. Let me just introduce myself real quick. I am the head of research integrity resolutions with the Springer Nature Research Integrity Group as my day job, and I'm also proud to serve as a trustee board member for the Committee on Publication Ethics. Today, I have the pleasure to moderate a panel that features Ashal Agrawal from India Research Watch, Sonali Vaz from the Dutch Recognition Rewards Program, and Caitlin Schleicher from the Open Research Community Accelerator. And we're going to be talking about incentives for ethical conduct. People who work in research integrity teams or with editors are familiar with the discussions around what causes authors sometimes to try and cut corners. And there's been a lot of talk about the root causes for that, and that is the way how researchers are being assessed, evaluated, and promoted by focusing on publication metrics, citation metrics, H indices, publishing in journals with specific impact factors, etc. So the very metric-driven approach can cause setting, maybe, as many might argue, the wrong type of incentives on how authors aim for a successfully looking publication record. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How we can change this. This is quite interesting for me, working at a publisher as well. But I think we've got three very interesting speakers here to share their perspectives on this. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Ashal and your presentation.
I'm Achal Agrawal. I'm from India Research Watch. For those of you who don't know us, we do a lot of research integrity analysis specific to India, but a lot of the things that we find in our analysis is applicable worldwide. So it's not just applicable to India. Before I start, I want to give a disclaimer, right? That even though I might be giving you a few examples of India, right? Misconduct is not specific to India, right? It is a worldwide problem, and there are many countries involved. We look at a few of them. Right, since IIW follows India more closely, right, so that is why our examples might be more from India, but don't consider that to be a reason why India is the only problematic place, right? So, with that disclaimer, let me start with a story, right? So this happened in colonial times during the British times, right? So they in Delhi they found there were a lot of cobra snakes around, and this was a big menace, so they wanted to get rid of those cobras. So what they did, they had a bounty, right? So they said, okay, let's have a bounty on cobras. If we kill the cobras, then there will be less of cobras, right? So they announced the bounty, and then people started, killing cobras and bringing to the person and getting some money for it, right? So this worked very well initially, and then people realized, hey, we can breed some more cobras, and then we have more cobras to kill, right? And then we can get more money, right? So they started breeding more cobras and getting more money, right? So after some time, the British realized that there's something wrong, and then they realized, oh, people are breeding cobras, so they stopped that program, right? So now what happens if they stop the program? People who are breeding cobras, they just left them in the forest because they don't spend money, rearing more cobras, right? So the end effect of all of it was that there were more cobras in the jungle, right? And something similar is happening in research as well right now. Right, so a lot of incentives are given to researchers, right? Sometimes direct. I'll give you some examples of direct cash for papers, right? So if you publish X number of papers, you get so much money, right? And so when that happens, right? Then people realize, oh, we can get papers published. So you have WhatsApp and Telegram channels, right? Where you can get some papers and first author position for that much amount, right? So you can actually make money by doing this, right? So people have found this out, and you have this whole industry of paper mills, which you must have read a lot of articles about, and which is plaguing kind of the publishing, right? So this is a cautionary tale that incentives are powerful, right? So no matter which way you put it, right, incentives always have an effect on the population. right? And it might lead to unintended consequences, which you have to guard against, right? You cannot uh, put the incentives and forget about it, right? And let nature take its course, right? We need to somehow keep monitoring and evolving the incentives, right? Now, in terms of which countries, right, are having the most amount of retraction. So here we are looking at retraction rate, right? That is the proportion of articles which are getting retracted, right? And we see that after 2020, right, there's been a peak in all these countries, right? And these are spanning Asia and East Africa, right? And India is not the worst, right? So these are like the six with the highest ones, and India is not in the top six at least. So we see that there has been a huge spike, right? So this is the proportion, right? It's not the number of papers, but the proportion of papers which are getting retracted. So this is highly worrying, right? And this is leading to all the mistrust in science and all the peripheral issues, right? And this is one clear signal that we have, right, of misconduct increasing in our recent times, right? Now, if you look slightly more closely at to the reason of why this is happening, so here in the graph, right, we plot uh, the percentage of increase in publications in the last 4 years, right? So this is how much they have increased their publications in the last 4 years. What is the percentage increase, right? And on the x-axis, you have the retraction rate, right? Which is again the proportion of articles which are getting retracted. And what we see is that the countries which have increased their publications a lot in the recent times are the ones which also have the highest retraction rate, right? You find a almost nice, perfect linear correlation, right? Of course, you have this correlation is not causation. Gang will jump in, but I'll show you examples of how it is directly related, right? This is not some spurious correlation, right? This is directly related to the rankings, right? So you have all these various rankings, right? Ironically, some of them are UK based, right? Like US rankings and THE rankings, right? So these rankings, QS rankings, for example, has a parameter called papers per faculty, right? Now that is directly incentivizing quantity of papers, right? Time share education, for example, does not remove self citations from the calculations, right? So what that means is that people who publish more can cite themselves more and increase their citation count, right? You also have this top 2% list, right? Again, which has a column, explicit column for retractions, right? Sorry. So it has an explicit column for retractions, and you have people with more than 100 retractions due to misconduct in that list, right? But being in that list is somehow considered as that you are part of top 2%, and you have a lot of people boasting about it, and also getting a lot of offers from universities thanks to that, right? So this is what is incentivizing, right? The quantity, it is the rankings, right? And the rankings, right, all partner with a publisher, which is kind of a potential conflict of interest that needs to be looked at closely, right? More evidence, right? This is a reward system for a university in India. And again, this happens worldwide, not just in India, it happens in even Europe, I am told. Right. So here we see that if somebody publishes, right, SCI, which is Web of Science paper with B and above journals, they get 50,000 rupees, which is around $500 dollars per paper, right? That is the bonus, and they even have a grill, right? So if you're the first author, you get 60%. If you're the second author, you get 40%, and so on, right? So it's also well established. Right? You also see that even for patents, right? Just for getting your patent published, right? Which every patent which is filed gets published, you get 25,000 rupees, which is $250 as bonus, right? And if your patent gets granted, which is 80% of the patents, then you get 1 lakh, which is about 1,000 US dollars as bonus, right? So you have direct incentives, right? That is one side, but you need carrots, but you also have sticks, right? So here we see a professor who had mailed us, right, talking about how the VC is putting unrealistic research goals, right? So they were suggesting the researcher to collaborate and get papers by any means, right? And if he did not do so, they were threatening to demote the faculty, right, because he could not meet the research targets, right? And then people like him were feeling the pressure, to give in and start publishing by unethical means, right? Of course, he's saying don't expose us in the future because we also talk about cases of misconduct. But this shows the kind of pressure as well, right? So it's not just carrots, but it's also sticks. And universities are using both the tools, right, to get researchers to publish more. And this is directly leading to the misconduct, right? And the reason why universities are doing this is clear. It's for the rankings, right? So Times Higher Education has 50% of their parameters is based on research. So Times Higher Education 60% is based on research. QS 50% is based on research, right? So these are huge numbers, right? And research is the one which changes the ranking of the universities. And so universities are trying to game that as much as they can, right? Some hope. So India, right, even though it's not the worst in the retraction rates, has still realized that it's a problem, and we have decided to start penalizing the universities which have many retractions, right? So this will apply to our nationalized rankings. This does not apply to the international rankings yet, right? There are some counterclaims. People say that what about honest retraction, right? So people who have withdrawn their paper because there was some error in the paper, right? So for that we have so Leslie McIntosh from Digital Science has developed a taxonomy which can help classify the retractions into different categories, right? So you have the serious categories like plagiarism, data manipulation, image manipulation, right? You have other categories like paper mills, fake author reviews, things like that. So they've classified the different kind of retractions, and you can easily look at the ones which are more uh, pertaining to misconduct and only penalize those retractions, right? So that is a problem easily solved thanks to retraction watch database. Right, so this is a measure which again, because the rankings, they have such so much impact, right? This is an immediate measure, but of course it is not treating the root problem. It is only treating the symptom, right, which is the retractions. Hopefully, right, the measures, the incentives are also changed, right? So that we don't even have to, have retractions to penalize. I know that I'm slightly short on time. I'll try to go faster. What can COPE do? Right. So one important thing which I talked to other sleuths as well, and everyone agreed on that COPE should have more better oversight. Right. So among the journals, they usually claim that they follow the COPE guidelines, but there's no transparency as to whether they actually do follow the COPE guidelines. And a lot of sleuths actually feel that some journals are not following the guidelines, and still they can claim it, and there is no one to say that, hey, you're not following the guidelines, right? So better oversight, right? Some way of independent audits and certification. I'll come to that more. I know that it's a big thing, and it's a controversial issue, and more importantly, some clearer guidelines, right? Because there's some loopholes in the guidelines, and working with sleuths, you can get better, you can plug those loopholes and make better guidelines so that people don't misuse those things, right? So, for example, right, Web of Science, right, had recently they delisted Curious, right? It had so many different 95,000 publications around, right? Totally. Now, if you look at the statistics of number of publications, right, in 2020 itself, there was a huge jump in the number of publications, right? That is when some alarms should have raised in the journal and at Web of Science that we need to look at it closely, right? Instead, it was put on hold in 2024, which is right here. After they saw there was a jump in India and Saudi Arabia as well, right? Probably then they realized that something is wrong, right? But if they had monitored, right, the number of publications, they could have started investigating here and maybe saved a lot of researchers their time, effort, and money, right, while publishing in this journal, right? And this gets counted in the rankings, right? So finally, all the rankings, they take into account SCI Web of Science, right? And all these papers get counted in the rankings, and then it gets delisted due to quality, right? So the benefit is already accrued, and there is no penalty, right? So hopefully, going forward, right, there'll be penalty for this as well. Lokman Meho has created an index, a research integrity risk index, which also uses the percentage of articles delisted as a penalty. Right. I hope that in future we'll look closely at that. Right. And just to be more fair, right, it's not just Web of Science, even Scopus. We have written a lot of times to Scopus as well. Right. You see a lot of journals with 100 times increase in number of documents, right, from year to year, right, 30x, right, and this is clear. And we also gave some examples of how articles are being sold in those journals, right? We still have not even received a response, right? Forget any action, but not even a response, right? So there is a need for COPE, right, or some independent body, right, to do this work, right, to do the monitoring, to ensure the investigations are happening, and not leave it, right, for the indexers, right, which have indexers are the same as the publishers, are the same as the rankers, right? They're doing too much of it. I think there's a need for independent body composed of all the publishers, right, which do it in a more transparent and a fair way, right? There are also cases where editor-in-chief themselves are found in predatory practices, right? So asking their names to be added in papers, asking for citations, right? Even when the editors are removed, right? The reason is not given, so they can claim to have left on their own accord, right? And they can do similar things in different other journals because that information, the investigation is not made public, right? So if there's a clear case of misconduct, it should be told, right, to everyone that because of misconduct he was removed from the editor-in-chief position, right? So that is something which COPE can perhaps do. And last one, I can go on for an hour, but this I promise is last one, is the retraction notices, right? So a lot of times retraction notices, it's good that there are mass retractions. So in this case, there were about 700 articles which were retracted. But the retraction notice for all those articles reads like this, right? So it says that they are retracted due to one of these following five reasons, right? Now, this makes it very difficult to know which one is due to misconduct and which one is not, right? So it's better if every retraction notice, every article has the specific reason for that article itself and not a vague blanket statement, right? So that because since retraction penalties are something which is going to be a reality, it is important that we know which how to classify the different retractions. Otherwise, all of them get clubbed into one big ball, and it's very difficult to distinguish, right, what is honest and what is not. Right. Thank you. And yeah, sorry if I overshot my time, but I think those things were important to say. And yeah, you can write to me at this, and you can ask questions. Thanks.
Right, brilliant. Thank you, Achal. Interesting way of setting the stage. I really love the historical comparison with the Cobra eradication program. Very interesting. Also, thanks for the points for advice for COPE. I'm sure that we can talk about it at the next COPE meeting, so we'll definitely take that into account. But I'm also interested to catch up on this at the discussion afterwards. So thanks for setting the stage. Next up, Stanley from the United Universities of the Netherlands, representing the Dutch Recognition and Rewards Program. Welcome, Stanley. The Dutch Recognition and Rewards Program is perhaps a way out of the issues and incentives that Achal has been describing. So, Stanley, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim. It's a pleasure to speak to this audience. Let me also share my screen, generic slides I show. I'm only going to present what the program we have been running. I was not running the program since the beginning. I only recently have joined as a program manager, but this program has been started about 4 or 5 years ago with a position paper, which is called Room for Everyone's Talent. And I would like to go through the incentives of it. It was very nicely mentioned that actually incentives can result in misconduct, but there is, I mean, the publication misconduct is only perhaps one of the symptoms of the change that has not been addressed at the universities. There are also the work pleasure, even in very affluent university, has reduced retention, work pressure has increased, but also a lot of let's say unhappy academics. And that's the question. Well, unhappy academics also will create unhappy outcomes, even if it goes through the whole classical process. And that was the question that was in the minds of the architects of the program. How can we actually make room for everyone's talent, given the increased complexity of what the university is asking? Well, that's the main question. Why do we need to change the recognition and reward system? Recognition in the sense of a lot of scientists would like to be recognized for their work, but rewards also means that they would like to also go through the system, upper in the ranks to be able to lead and be in leadership positions, and that's also connects to the rewards. The original aims actually of the whole project has been summarized very well here, is that we know what we are aiming at as concretely good results for the benefit of society, but also reliable science. But that is not what we are rewarding at. That was evident from many research that has been done. For example, in scientometrics, people have seen that, but also a lot of cases of misconduct have shown that. Also, just asking the people, and they will tell you what are you rewarded for. And what you think you have to be rewarded for. And usually these two things are going quite out of each other. For example, teaching is one of the examples which comes forward a lot, but there are also a lot of things inside each of the elements of working at the university. So, I mean, I would like to go one level back, because there's also this very hard myth that maybe is in the center of a lot of assumptions that we are taking about usefulness of certain things or not being useful. And that is this myth, very old myth, that science and the scientists are working to discover truth, right? And it's from the old times of Archimedes all the way to even more recently. This is a picture from the AI scientists recently calculated how much does it cost to have an AI scientist, with the assumption of the AI scientist after discovering truth. Personally, after that, which means that you have to look at the literature, find the gaps, do the research, and create the outcome in form of a publication. And this is specific article said if you want everything to be done by the AI, it will cost, I don't know, $12, and that's you will get an article. Which I think it's again based on the myth that science, the way we are setting it in modern science, modern academia, is run for going for these external truths, which we already know with many studies. This is not true. This is not the incentive of the scientist on a day-to-day practice. Maybe there's a horizon or there is a guide star in the long run, but it is not day-to-day guiding people. We know it from the work of Bruno Latour already 50 years ago that actually what scientists want is credit. They would like to be trusted by the other scientists, and whatever they do is for these credit to increase so that they actually have access to resources and they can continue doing what they think they are good at. This is the credit cycle of Latour. You can see it. It starts from the fact that you come with some recognition, a degree or a publication, then you're given resources, you use it to create new experiments, gather data, you turn those data into arguments, you present it in form of articles, for example, and based on those, you will be getting more recognition and more money to continue. And well, I mean, people discovered this and they said, oh, I can do this faster and faster. At the same time, science have become much more complicated. And I actually believe that this model nowadays not even work, even though still used a lot in the arguments that if you fix the incentives at the individual level, you will eventually try to, you will succeed in improving the system level, which I have some serious doubts about if that works like that. And there are some, indications which is not going to work. One of it is that, the number of people going through this cycle is increasing, but they're also going faster and faster. And as you can see with the number of articles published, this is even before the AI, frenzy started and people started. This is before the paper mills. We already knew that one cannot possibly follow the literature anymore like in the past years. There are a lot of multidisciplinary work which are increasing. So, and this is also most probably get lost if you continue to work with disciplinary journals, or our universities are also set up as disciplinary institute. And also, what is even discipline? So if you look at, for example, the graph underneath from O'Neill is that these are the authorship connections. And if there were disciplines, you should have seen, some a bit disconnected or fractured cloud, but there is just one big cloud of collaborations. So I even don't know what is a discipline. I'm from physics, and I think I understand what physics mean, but I actually don't know if that is the right type of knowledge I have to convey and transfer for my research trainees so that they can actually continue in this field. Of course, there is a classical knowledge that is very important to keep, but it's very hard to talk about discipline. And if you want to work in the credit cycle, you need to understand your field. People would like to have a name in their field. And this is also asked from a lot of reviewers, is this a person a reputable scientist in this field? But if the field doesn't exist, that question also becomes irrelevant. And also the graph on the right also shows that there's also a lot of transfer between academia and outside at all the stages of academia. So also people do not just do research for the body of knowledge, they do for many, many different purposes. Some of them want to have the degree, but some of them want to experience something else. They go and come in, go out of the university all the time. So that's also a bit of mismatch between incentives and what we think academia is made for. This is what I think could be a better model for these days, and that's we are not talking about the credibility network. So you have all these micro contributions that you, in different ways, articles is one of them, but it can be a blog, it can be a code, piece of data, you contribute to this big cloud, and this is only increasing, becoming faster and faster because contributions are getting smaller and the cloud is getting bigger and more connected. And well, to my understanding, we have very little tools for understanding the credit in the cloud. How are you going to value micro contributions, which can be, I don't know, 1 million a year, and then also sum it up in a way that you can figure out who is a prominent node and who is, or where is the prominent node, even if it can be a unit or can be an individual or can be a discipline. We just don't know the tools, we don't have. And articles is one tool, but definitely not a suitable tool, not fast enough for this. Well, with this understanding, we said, okay, let's look at our institution. The institution is sort of a unit we can have some control over. And inside our institutions in the Netherlands, we say we would like this institution to be working in a proper modern institution. And these were the elements of what do we need to change in the recognition and rewards of the people who are working. It starts with the fact that we know we need different talent types with different types of working. So we have to create room for all sort of people. No single measure for everyone. We need teachers, researchers, managers. We need data scientists. We need all sort of people. And all these people should feel rewarded. That's number one. Of course, this has to go in balance with the benefits of the collective. So we have to figure out how to communicate the mission of the collective with this individual, but also how to balance the freedom they get with their contribution to the collective. This was two, and only these two together will actually make the system stable. For doing that, to be collective, we say we would like to focus on quality instead of quantity. So it's already a couple of years that in the Netherlands, reporting edge indices is even banned in the grant proposals. People take it out. So we said, all these measures that we can gain, we don't want to. That's just a start. And we also have started exploring what are the measures of the qualities for all different types of work that we do in academia in different disciplines. So we can have out to 30, 40 measures of quality in the Netherlands, and we're trying to map them. We would like to have a vision for how science would look like, and that is the focus on open science. So one of the pillars for stimulating open science, which that's another talk for itself. And to go from the state we have now to the future, which is desired, we need to work with the leadership. So there have been also a lot of emphasis and trainings and a lot of work on stimulating good academic leadership at the personal level, but also at the group level, inside the hierarchy and the line of management we have. This is the position paper we are working with. Maybe today we can also specify, and I would like to really go strong on this balance between the individual and collective. Some people call it team science, which is essential for keeping integrity. Relying on personal incentives for keeping the integrity of science is a hard ask. We are in a complex state of the system that even in some places, the personal incentives, the rational thing to do personally is to break the system, to work against the integrity of the system. And that is a situation that we have to skip as soon as possible. The program is signed by all the universities and the funders, the major funders of the Netherlands. So it is a very broad support at a high level. And if you really want to know about the program, check our forum. There we can actually discuss also, and you can see all the examples of how things have been done in the Netherlands. I stop here, Tim. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stanley. I really like how you started with unhappy academics will perhaps inevitably lead to unhappy results. I think that's nice. And then you took us from Bruno Latour, which took me back to my philosophy of science days as well, to some nice ideas about how to give credit to micro contributions in a cloud of science. And I think that's something interesting to explore perhaps in the discussion later as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up is Caitlin Schleicher. And she will present on the M3A program. And I'm not going to give an introduction about what that is because she can do that a lot better herself. So the floor is yours, Caitlin.
Thank you. And close enough. It's MA3, which is a little confusing, but it's the Modernizing Academic Appointment and Advancement Challenge, and I'm really honored to be here today to talk about it. It is, I must say, good early morning here from Maryland in the US. I'm the program officer for the MA3 Challenge, and I'm also the director of community and partnerships for the Open Research Community Accelerator, which works with communities across ecosystems to make science more engaging, accessible, actionable. And I'm excited to share with you an overview of the MA3 Challenge. I think my panelists did an excellent job laying out some of the issues with our misaligned research incentive system. Here in the States, we're grappling with a rapidly changing federal grant landscape, so we often talk to our researchers about misaligned incentives related to grant dollars and publication counts, and that's really not the world where we are able to do that much anymore with sort of the issues related to grant funding. So with that said, I'm excited to share information about a potential start of a solution to address misalignment in our incentives. So again, MA3 Challenge, what the goal is to invite proposals from US-based accredited tax-exempt colleges and universities. And this includes colleges, departments, centers, institutes within them to reimagine their hiring, review, promotion, and tenure systems. So the initiative really is seeking bold and creative strategies to develop academic reward systems that foster a collaborative, responsive, and transparent research environment. This includes ensuring better openness of research and research integrity. Collectively, I have to thank our funders, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the Dana Foundation, the Rita Allen Foundation, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who have contributed $1.5 million to the institution seeking funding for efforts that lead to explicit changes in hiring and RPT policies and practices, and strengthen capacity to promote these changes within and across institutions. Our partners for this effort are the Aspen Institute Science and Society Program and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Just for reference for the international audience, you may be familiar with the National Academies in Washington, D.C. The American Academy of Arts and Sciences is similar. It's in Cambridge, in the Boston area, and it was started by the founding fathers in the U.S. So just in case we have any U.S. folks or from institutions in the audience, I did want to point out that applications are due on January 8th, 2026. Participants that are awarded funding will form a community practice that ORCA will lead. And really, this is designed to accelerate learning within the cohort, ensure that emerging insights can be efficiently disseminated to the broader higher education community, and more. We're able to award up to 6 grants in each tier. So in general, we're thinking about, $250,000 awards for the larger U.S. college or university and their large divisions. So this is, the schools or colleges, while tier 2 are $50,000 awards for changes within departments, centers, and institutes. We understand that the makeup in the U.S. can look quite different with different divisions, so we are flexible. And in looking who might be eligible to serve as PI, so it's really important that there is administrator support. We are looking for, provost, vice provost for faculty affairs, dean of faculty, or department chairs, depending on the tier. If it is not that person in that role, we are looking for somebody who really has, working closely with the executive leadership team to move activities forward. These are individuals who have visibility and influence on institutional policies and practices, and basically the power to make some of these changes across the academy. Here in the States, we have I've worked at several different institutions, and they all have different shared or not shared governance bodies. And so it's really important that we have a person who can navigate that kind of infrastructure. And with this award, we're looking for institutions to address all 4 MA3 goals. So many of these goals will, we hope, support better research integrity as we're asking applicants to tell us how they will develop academic reward systems that foster a collaborative, responsive, and transparent research environment, tackle challenges in existing hiring and or advancement language, processes, and policies, develop and foster capacity for institutional change work within the academy, and advance beyond the discussion phase into implementation. This is really important. Previously, I was the director of the Higher Education Leadership Initiative for Open Science or Open Scholarship. This was an effort that emerged from the National Academies Roundtable on aligning incentives for open scholarship. And we were really focused on, and we're focused here on making the changes. A lot of institutions in this space have talked a lot and had a lot of conversations, but these are test things out, make some changes, implement changes to your guidelines. Just a couple of notes, last notes really. We're looking again for those implementation forward proposals, and we do really encourage partnerships. I know this is sort of for everyone's probably familiar with the fact that, professional societies, for example, play a really important role in developing norms and fostering them. We also, again, really need to make sure that the administrators, like the provost's office, are key in moving this forward. We're pretty flexible with, which tier might work for institutions, and we're really focused on values alignment. So research integrity might be something that's really important to an institution. It's probably important to all institutions, but we are really focused on what the institution's context might be. So, many institutions might be a public and land grant institution, so they might be really invested in the public good. So they're really supposed to figure out what that means for them. We often share during information sessions the Humetrics HSS initiative. And so really this is a values framework, and it offers a value-enacted, process-oriented approach to scholarly production, decision-making, and evaluation. They have a ton of resources on their site. But I also really wanted to share a case study to end. So on the right over here, again, while I was the director of Helios Open in my previous role, this case study about Stanford University School of Medicine was really important in kind of getting us past that first movers issue in the US. And so here they were demonstrating their commitment to research integrity and transparency by framing the importance of faculty contributions to open scholarship. Specifically at the School of Medicine, the Associate Dean of Clinical and Translational Research, Professor Steve Goodman, and his team developed an optional CV addendum, basically allowing faculty to highlight their use of open practices. And the goal was to really support research integrity. He said he wanted to make sure that it was designed to make their research reliable, robust, and transparent. In the sample CV, candidates can include optional rigor and reproducibility, he calls it R&R, items with check marks and hyperlinks, and they can indicate if they've shared analysis plans, data or code availability, presentation materials, videos and publicly accessible articles, etc. They also updated their guidance of the candidate statement, and they explicitly state that the School of Medicine does not use citation metrics or impact factors, asking candidates not to include those in their application. And the candidate statement form also now includes new guidance on how to incorporate the R&R or rigor and reproducibility practices as a companion to the optional CV format. So all credit goes to Stanford and Dr. Goodman and his team, but these are the types of things that we're looking to stimulate with the funding opportunity more and more and at scale in the US. So I will end there, but thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. This is, I think, a really interesting initiative, and also people actually putting their money where their mouth is in terms of actually trying to fund these initiatives and trying to get them some traction. I think that's really excellent. So thank you so much for sharing this. A couple of questions have come in, and there are a couple of questions that I quite selfishly, as a moderator, also have on the back of your presentations. I was wondering about your thoughts about something like the DORA declaration, right? So I think for most of you know that the DORA declaration is something that people would voluntarily sign up for, to basically declare that as a signatory, you don't want to place too much emphasis on the importance of things like impact factor, but also we also know that, and to be fair, this also applies to publishers, that, for example, increases in impact factors are also celebrated, used to promote journals and used to attract authors. I was wondering, and maybe Ashel, I wonder if you can go first. How do you think something like Dora could become more effective?
Right. So the thing is, rankings are here to stay, right? So it is, even though we wish that these rankings don't exist, or at least they don't do such a very simplistic measure of research, right? The reason why these rankings are there is because they have a utility, because people look into them to make their decisions, right? They don't have the time to look at the nuances of the research, right? They want a metric to cover it all. What Dora suggests and is right a more qualitative analysis. Right now, that is very difficult to do at scale. Right, when you're looking at universities across the world and trying to rank them. Right, doing this individual analysis is very difficult to do at scale. Right, and so that's the reason why the metrics are used. Right, and we are still stuck with metrics from 20 years ago. Right, H index was invented 20 years back, and still that is the metric which is used, right, even after all the evidence of how it has been gamed, right, since 2010. And so it is right. It is nice to talk about qualitative metrics. I wish that we all move to that, but I think these quantitative metrics are here to stay. But we have to devise, and there are so many research papers, scientometrics papers, like talking about a better way to catch all this manipulation, right? But we are very in the metrics used in rankings. It's very rudimentary, right? To citations per faculty, citations per paper, right? These kind of rudimentary metrics. So we need to, invent good, robust metrics, which will get gamed. We have to keep evolving them again and again, right? So it is right. We are kind of catching up to that manipulation.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Sunli, any thoughts on the Dora declaration specifically?
Anything that comes collective here helps. Actually, in the
Mhm.
Netherlands, Dora was one of the starting points, and it was very important. It took the funding agency in the Netherlands a couple of years of research to sign it, because they said, well, when we sign it, we would like to be able to apply it. So they have gone through all their procedures of grant review, etc., to make sure that it is actually Dora compatible. In the other institutions, the same. It is always very important. I would like to add a very small point to Parashal. It is possible to work with metrics. The point is also we can also change the perspective. If we shift the focus from individuals to projects, that will be a very big, huge shift. You can still rate projects, which are the collaborations, and then propagate that to the individuals contributed without bringing back to the role of individual, because you don't know what are the contributions to the project. And we already get a lot of shift in the willingness to collaborate and have good projects, good collective action, if we do not assess individuals, but we do assess project results.
Caitlin, any thoughts? Do you think sort of like this focus on projects instead of individual contributions could be a way out of the metrics fetish?
I don't know. I think it's really context specific. And when you talk about projects, I think that's really, I'm curious for you to elaborate a little bit more on the types of projects you're thinking. So like in my space, I'm thinking more about like elevating things like community engaged scholarship, elevating some of the things that might traditionally fall into the service category, which we know is something that underrepresented researchers and women often are taking on the burden of a lot of that service work, and it's not as highly, idolized, I guess, as sort of the research or the teaching even components of tenure. But I also really wanted to just say that it was a timely question about Dora. So I'm speaking at one of their events later today, if my voice holds on. But it seems like they're increasingly, so again, as others have said, they were many kind of researchers' gateway into the research reform conversation. So it's still remaining incredibly important in this space. When I was at my previous institution, Johns Hopkins, I know that our vice provost for research would come to us in the informationist side of the suite and say, do we need to sign Dora? And so really the point, I think, is, yes, but to what end? And so that's why we're so focused on change and implementation of change. And I will say that they have released a really helpful practical guide to implementing responsible research assessment at research performing organizations, and their effort reformscape, again, just to give institutions and have at hand examples of documents, language, policies that have some changes in them so that we can have them for institutions that maybe are, well, I don't know what we would even do. And so here's some examples.
Yeah, thank you. I like one question that's been on my mind, and it's also come up when you sort of think about the role of different stakeholders. And maybe Stanley, this is for you. Given that we know that money talks, what do you think the primary role of funders in this could be? I know that, like you said, like all the main Dutch research funders have been part of the recognition and rewards program. Is there a lesson in there for research funders elsewhere? And what is sort of like their role, and how can they put their weight behind something that like you're doing?
It seems that there have been some pause, so I did not get the last part of your question, Tim.
Sorry. Basically, how can funders holding the money set conditions on how the money is spent and how the results and the outputs of the stuff that they funded can be measured? Do you think there's something funders can do to drive change here?
Yeah, so I will go back to what Caitlin said. It's about the context. So the funders and all of us, the publishers. I hope my quality of connection doesn't make hindrance here. Am I good?
Yep, you good.
Yeah, because I see something hovering. So I would generally say, if you want research integrity, it's a collective endeavor, and you can do it locally by having the right conditions. It's the same with, safety of the laboratories. You cannot make every single person responsible. You also need the context of having a safe laboratory. The same is for certain types of infrastructure. And I will say integrity is one form of infrastructure. So the publishers, if they want it, they should actually help the universities, all the institutions, employers to create the right conditions for it. And this is not only for the funders, for all the other actors, publishers, the same. If you draw this wedge between the personal benefit and the institutional benefit, at the end, we will all be losing. So if there are system level things, the incentives should be also at the system level. So, and if there are things like integrity, like reproducibility, like the good funding, for example, or good promotion criteria are system level issues, the funders and the institutions should collaborate on the institution level. And the same for the publishers, right? Then I can give many examples of how, for example, publishers also are drawing this wedge, like personal editorships, for example, given without really asking the consent of the institution for that to happen. And this is already putting individual benefit on top of the collective. And this is what we have harvested from many, many years of doing this practice. The pendulum has gone so far, especially in the Anglo-Saxon system, towards this individualized system, which is put together by a lot of patchwork, but it's not actually working as a group.
Thank you. Interesting comments, specifically for someone who actually works at a publisher as well. So thanks. I'd like to, well, maybe we come back to publishers a bit later. I don't want to make this too publisher heavy. There's a question from the chat for you, Ashel, around whether you think that retractions being penalized will actually stop researchers being pressured to publish as well. So the person who raised the question said, when I first heard about it, I thought researchers would just be fired or suspended if their paper is retracted, and an institutional investigation into misconduct will be incentivized to hide misconduct and will actually not recommend retraction. So what do you think? Do you think penalizing for retractions is the right way to go?
Right. So firstly, right, this already happens, right? So nobody, right, even when there's no penalty for retractions, nobody likes a retraction, right? So whenever you ask authors, you'll usually find retraction notice. In the end, it's written that the author disagrees with the retraction, right? In the institutions already, right, even when there was no penalty, they knew that retractions are not good, and they would try their best, right, to not have the retraction happen. Same goes with the journals as well, right? Journals also understand that too many retractions from a journal, right, will kind of stain the reputation of the journal, right? And it could be a reason why it gets delisted by Scopus or Web of Science, right? So there has been like people don't want retractions, right? And that is a problem that sleuths have, right, with the publishing industry, that a lot of times the retractions are so evident they should happen, but there are ways found to, convert it to a correction, right, and the things like that, right? So that will continue, and if I know Tim can answer this better, but I heard from the publishers that now Indian authors are more concerned about their retractions, right? This was by IOP Publishing, right? And they said that now they're receiving more pushback from the Indian authors after this rule has come, right? And they are having to investigate more, right? Because of all the questions that the authors are asking, right? Now that is a good thing, right? That there is more investigation, because a retraction is an important thing. More investigation is a good thing. Of course, the problem with that is that there are other cases which they need to look at, which they don't have time for, because they have to concentrate so much on these cases. Uh, in which case, right, they should know that, or Tim can tell this better. What is the number of people in the research integrity team, right, and the number of people in the marketing team, right? If you look at the proportions in any publisher, right, and not just one publisher, you'll find a huge disproportion, right? The number of people in research integrity in most major publishers is very small team, even though that is like one of the major uh, the objectives of the publishers right now, right? Because
Mm.
putting papers online is now, free of cost, right? Ensuring research integrity is the main objective, and there's so few resources, right, given to that. So uh, having this kind of penalty will definitely need more resources, but we think there should be, publishers have enough money, right? We've seen the profits. Recently, Paolo Crocetto had a paper talking about what is the percentage profits of all the publishers. It's more than Apple and Google, and we have seen all these articles, right? So there is no lack of money from the publisher side, right? But that should be right, used for research integrity purposes. And I'm sure, right, I mean, there is more pressure perhaps, but I can give an example, right? In India, there's a university where somebody has 34 retractions due to peer review manipulation and image manipulation, right? So these are like important, the clear misconduct, and they have been promoted and, given felicitated for being good researcher and so on, right? So right, currently the status is no action at all, right? So this will definitely help in, of course, if somebody has just one retraction, I don't think it will lead to firing them or anything like that, but at least universities will be more concerned about people with, many retractions due to misconduct, and more careful about it during recruitment as well, right? So till now nobody looked at the number of retractions, but at least now they look at that thing, right? So yeah, I think it's a
Mm.
good measure. It will not stop it's not addressing the root cause, right? But it is an effective measure because people care about, universities care about rankings, right?
Mm.
I know that in Europe and US maybe they don't as much, but in India or in low middle income countries, right, rankings are the most important kind of currency, right? And that is why we are seeing this misconduct more in this part of the world.
Interesting. Well, yeah, as someone working in a research integrity team with a publisher, I can definitely guarantee that barely any author is happy when we tell them an article needs to be retracted. So we're spending a lot of time there working on that. And sure, I definitely would love a bigger budget for my team. Not to get stuck on retractions too much, but it's also something that came out of prep call that we had a bit. A retraction happens on sort of like an article level, and that sort of harks back to publishing and publishing model. As Sunny already um, mentioned the role of publishers in this. And when you think about it, the way research is still being disseminated is on a journal article level, which is basically hasn't really changed in the last 350 years. It's now just a PDF instead of printed pages. So that's also a different way. And I wonder, maybe Caitlin, if changes in or potential innovations from in the dissemination of publishing, is it something that you'd be interested in for your project, or is it something that could also move away from setting the wrong types of incentives when just chasing publication metrics based on article publishing.
Yeah, for sure. I think we would encourage sort of straying away from the article level metric or, journal level metrics, article level metrics, and bean counting in general. We definitely aren't focused on doing away with journals or anything like that. We still understand the importance, especially to the specific disciplines and to the norms for different discipline-specific areas. But, I think publishers make it really easy to put citation reports together. I was responsible for doing that a couple of times at a previous institution for a medical school, and it always made me feel a bit icky because I knew that it was going to be used for advancement at the center, but I think there's plenty, again, of research on the disadvantages of relying on citation counts. At one of our annual research integrity colloquiums, we had a senior faculty member stand up to present solely on the culture of enumeration, and he urged us not to use those metrics as proxy for impact. And so I think the more and more we talk about research transparency as part of research integrity, it's sort of agnostic to the bean counting idea in a way. And so that's why I really like Stanford's approach to show us that you have open protocol and open data and open software contributions, and don't tell us your H-index. We will bounce your application back if you do. So I think it's really great. Yeah.
Interesting. Suddenly you have your mic unmuted, so it sounds
Yeah.
like you're keen to go.
I think this is something already publishers do, but we need the shift from it. And publishers already do not accept so easily, journals coming from high schools, like submissions from, people at high school, even though they can look like with the modern technology very much like articles. There are checks and balances where the institutions are, but we have to upgrade them. And there, my recommendation would be like what we do in our program, to go from quantitative measures to qualitative measures. And the quality is a context. Of course, individual contribution to open science is very important, but these contributions have different meanings in a resourceful center like, a Stanford, which has all these resources for open science, reproducibility, and in comparison with other universities. And this must be, in a just way, given, I think, the qualities, if we emphasize qualities, also for the articles that we publish, and qualities can be reproducibility, can be availability of data, can be a lot of measures that we already know. There's a lot of research around. Apart from the quantitative, how many people have cited, which is all reputation based. It is basically hands off. We don't know how to judge quality, so we just count. And the same can happen to the institutions. And this has to be cumulative. So institutions can build up all the way from their output, their qualities, and they somehow create these qualities and use that as a measure of pride. And well, if you make the quantities available, they will use it. But you can also, like DORA and other declarations, make it very prominent that this article, for example, is coming from institutions who have signed DORA. This article is coming from institution who have, an open science infrastructure. This article is coming from institution who has this certain quality measures embedded. And then you will be, talking at a different level. This is a bit like ethical conduct. I saw in the comments that, some places don't have, ethical misconduct on the article level. But if you're doing animal research and your article does not have, ethical approval, your article cannot even go to the reviewer. So there are some levels that we know how to apply the ethical guidelines for the proper research. And this we now have to apply to the type of research we do and extend the quality measures.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is sort of like a nice segue to something from the that came from the chat. Caitlin first, but maybe then Ashal can weigh in as well. But the question is, thank you, Caitlin, love the initiative. How will the results be implemented, do you think? And at the same time, we've just seen that the countries with the most retractions are not the US. How do you envisage to make the results relevant to academia outside the US? And that also, I think, ties in neatly with what Stanley said about well-researched universities being able to go beyond the bean counting, as you just call it. But how do you think you can make the output of your project relevant for a more diverse group of universities?
Sure, and maybe we didn't make the graph that Dr. Agrawal showed, but we have plenty of cases of retractions in the US, and it is still an issue, especially in sort of top tier journals. Research misconduct is, always an issue. We have, I'm sure this is similar in other countries, but we have a growing need for sort of research integrity officers at different institutions in the US. But I think in terms of, the different types of roadmaps, what I said and in my answer, but also again here is that in the US, institutions often do or just feel that they are very different than their peer institution or another institution in the state. I don't know always if that is the case. I think there are several sort of blueprints or models that could work at various institutions. But they definitely feel, and maybe this is a very US way of again just being, but that they are individual, that they have their own local cultures, their own local context, and so they wouldn't dare suggest that another institution has to do what they're doing at their institution in terms of reforming or revising incentive structures. Um, they also have different values, and so that's why we are working at the intersection of, community engaged scholarship, public impact research, societally impactful research, open science. And so it's really on them to tell us how they want to and why they want to reform their systems or their incentive systems based on their own specific context. So that's one thing about what implementation would look like. And then we also are hoping to produce with the community of practice some blueprints. And so while an institution might be hyper-focused on their local context, I think it's on us, the ORCID team, to generalize some of the blueprints and the case studies so that they could be adopted and adapted at all kinds of institutions.
Right, right. Thank you. Michelle, any thoughts on whatever very American results come out of Caitlin's program, and how that could be applied to India, you think?
Right. So firstly, I just wanted to clarify what Caitlin was saying, that US, there is still number of retractions, right? So in the world is still number 2 in number of retractions. And if you can see the graph here, right, there has been an increase in the recent times. But right, the difference between US and let's say China or India, right? Here we see the comparison of the 3 countries, and the proportion of the articles which are getting retracted in US is still comparatively low, right, compared to India and China, right? So that is in terms of retraction statistics for US. That yes, the number is high, but the proportion is still lower than some other more problematic countries. In terms of getting that same, right? So in India, for example, right, it is difficult for anyone to convince a university that you should look at more responsible metrics, right? Because in the end, right, their main goal is to be better in the rankings, because they get the admissions, right, based on that. If they're good in rankings, they'll get more students, they can charge higher fees, right? Their income directly is based on that, right? So right, it is all nice, right, to have all the open, responsible research evaluation and all these measures. But in Indian university, right, you can bang your head against the wall, or other university, in Pakistan, in Egypt, and other places as well. Right, but I don't think any university is going to, who's caring about the rankings, will listen to these recommendations. They are all great, right? I totally agree with them. But yeah, it is very difficult for them to be implemented at university level, right? In our country at least.
That's interesting. It brings me to the next question. Maybe for Stanley, because you also commented on the role of institutional leadership in all this. I wonder if there is perhaps, how do you overcome what you could call a survivorship bias, right? People who have risen to the top of an institution they've come on top based on their old performance metrics and the old ways of being promoted. How do you best manage to convince them to overturn all basically that route that has given them their place in their career?
Yeah. Well, I think those people also are pretty smart, so that they could have climbed, and they will always pay attention to evidence. And that is, I think, for many in the leadership position, very obvious that if they do not bring back this intrinsic motivation, intrinsic values back to the institution in the very vast landscape of other institutions who are not universities but providing better conditions for research, for ethical research, for productivity, they will lose. I mean, this we already, in California, I don't know if Caitlin knows, but in California it's very difficult to compete with the big companies over postdocs, right? With postdocs or things like that. So it is clear also for the institutions, if they want to be the bastions of free and open knowledge, they have to support their credit, and it is for the long run. Maybe going after the next metric of the next hype brings you forward for the next 10 years, but institutions like universities have been there for 400, 500 years, and eventually the institutions who are doing more robust research will be in the long run more trusted and will become, I would say, the winners of the competition for talent.
Interesting. Caitlin, I see you enthusiastically nodding to this as well.
Yeah, no, just +1. And I can share just a quick anecdote about the survivor bias conversation. I think that the sentiment is going away, though I have heard it. Like, I wouldn't tell my students to publish open access or focus on that, because that's not how you get tenure. Wait till you get tenure and then do that, things like that. I think it's, we've been saying a lot in different meetings in the States, like, never waste a crisis, unfortunately. So we recently hosted a meeting at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and it was 30 administrators, so presidents, provosts, and deans that came together, and everyone sort of met the moment of urgency. They were saying even things like, this is very flippant because no one, I think, truly believes this, but like anyone over 40 should just retire. So clearly that is not the solution. But I think what they were saying is really the sentiment was like, we are so far behind in actually changing the way that we incentivize, especially early career researchers. We just need to hear from them. You tell us what you need, and then we will support that from our positions and our leadership roles on campus. They were super energized about the newer generation of researchers and how to make sure that they succeed in the academy. And again, there's that competition for talent, and it's working. We did discuss some horror stories, but again, that's not what leaders want at their institutions. And then for overall research reform in the US, I think, again, it's just, it's really important to make sure that we are moving quickly. And so I think that's happening.
Really good. Thank you. I'm looking at the time. We're nearly there. I'd like to give each and every one of you 1 minute to give you sort of like one wish list item of a thing that you would want to change right now. Starting with you, Ashel.
Right. So for me, it is the rankings, right, and the metrics. We need to come up with better metrics, and and a lot of research already exists on that. We just need to implement those things. And COPE, right? I hope does more of oversight, right? And it is not right. Somebody said that it might take a lot of money. It will not take too much money, right? The publishers and the journals themselves can do the investigation. COPE just need to have oversight, right? So there can be some ticketing system which, if COPE wants to see, right, they can go and look at how is the investigation being done, what are the timelines, right? Is it being done in a timely fashion, or is it taking years, right? Those kind of oversight. And of course, it will require some investment, but it is not, insurmountable given the resources COPE has, right? So, and the publishers have. So I hope that, these things change and we do better.
All right. Thank you so much. Sunli?
Yeah, I would say invest in shared resources and stop individual marketing to individuals at everybody, funders, universities, publishers, anybody. This has been gone too far. That would be my message.
Really good. Short and sweet. Love it. Thank you. Caitlin?
Yeah, I think I'll just echo my colleagues and what they said. Well, other than I don't know that we need new metrics, but that is definitely my bias showing. And I just appreciate you giving us this platform to share about this funding opportunity, and looking forward to hearing more.
Really good. Thank you so much. I'd love to thank the three of you for your great contributions and your insights and your comments also during the discussion. I'd also really love to thank the audience for their questions. We've tried to get through as many as possible, so thank you so much. And also, again, thanks for the COPE team for putting all this together. This brings us to the end of this particular session. If I understand correctly, the recording of this will be made available later. So if you thought it was interesting and you know someone has been able to attend, please pass it on as well.